Um, and as a reminder, we will be recording this session just to share it with folks who cannot be with us today. But really quickly, wanted to welcome everyone to this session. Bienvenidos a todos. My name is Jessica Martinez, and I serve as the co-director for the National Council on Occupational Safety and Health. Welcome to those who are very familiar with our programming, our monthly programming, and also welcome to new folks who maybe this is your first time joining us in a webinar session or one of our programs. So bienvenidos a todos. Mi nombre es Jessica Martinez y sirvo como la codirectora del Consejo Nacional de
Hi, I'm
Salud.
Jessica Martinez, and I am National COSH co-director. We have education programs each month, and if this is your first time, we're glad to have you with us.
We'll speak specifically on building effective worker-led health and safety committees to build worker power. Esta sesión se va a tratar sobre cómo crear comités de salud y seguridad dirigidos por trabajadores. And it is a bilingual session, and we'll get to some of those instructions shortly. So if we can go on to the next slide, Jesse, appreciate that. Right into the programming for today. So just so folks are aware of today's goal, as I mentioned earlier, today we're going to be covering how to build effective health and safety committees. But the key thing is how to build committees in the same time in the process of building worker power. So one of the goals for today is to highlight how health and safety committees support the process to build worker power. The second goal of today's session is to learn about different health and safety committee models. So I'm really excited that we'll be able to hear from two of the organizations that we work in partnership with and share a little bit about their process to build committees. And then number three is to share experiences on worker committees and explore the best model for your goals. So that's going to be an opportunity to share between all of us, whether you've had experience, whether you have not, what that looks like, what is the best model for you, etc. Could go on to the next slide. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll start off with an introduction to the committees and how they build worker power. We'll then move on to examples of worker health and safety committees. We'll do breakout groups, and we'd kindly ask everyone to wait to the very end because we're going to be sharing really helpful resources. We'll do an evaluation and a closing. A reminder, all our webinars are mainly 90 minutes, and we'd love everyone's participation for most of the session. So important to note. So let's get into a little bit, let's get right into it in terms of what are worker health and safety committees. And a health and safety committee can really be an important way to improve conditions on the job. The committee provides a forum or a space for workers to organize and solve health and safety problems. An effective committee can do many things. It can help prevent injury and illness on the job. It can increase awareness about health and safety issues among workers and management. And develop strategies to make the work environment safe and healthy. Committees come in different shapes and styles, but it can include also allies, not necessarily only the workers from the work site, but they cannot exist without a core group of committed worker leaders who are directly affected by the hazards that workers have identified on the job. So it's important to note. So if we can go on to the next slide. And as I briefly mentioned, there's different types of committees. Generally, committees can either be worker only or worker and management, which means that you'll have workers and you can have a supervisor all sitting in the same table and discussing ways to improve the health and safety conditions of the work site. So typically for worker only committees, they can consist of workers in a common workplace or with a common employer coming together with a strategic plan to improve workplace health and safety while building worker power. It can also include workers with different employers or even different industries advocating for safety improvements in a region. in a city. It really is. And one example of this is Kosh groups, or who consist of worker advocates. And if you don't know what a Kosh group is, I'm going to invite you to visit our website, which are coalitions on occupational safety and health. And we have several. We have over 25 member affiliates across the country. So that's the worker only committees. We also have joint worker management committees, which can review and advise the health and safety programs in a workplace or multiple workplaces. It's important to note that typically when you have a worker management committee, they are often set up by a union contract or by law. And we'll get to some examples of both type of committees. So later throughout the session, it's important to know though, when you have worker management committees, because of management's presence and balancing power dynamics, there can sometimes exist a risk for joint health and safety committees to not be as effective as they need to be to make real improvements and prevent serious injuries. It's usually advisable, and this is advice coming from our network and our experience, that to have worker only committees, even if you have a worker management committee that exists. While there are legal and contractual ways to establish committees, workers who face serious hazards shouldn't wait for these formal committees to be set up. For a committee to exist, all it really needs is a group of workers who are willing to organize and fight for safe working conditions. And for, workers within a committee, workers could organize themselves to start the committee. The other way that I mentioned earlier is there's laws that mandate health and safety committees, like the New York HEROES Act that we have in the state of New York. There's also contracts or agreements between management and workers that can formalize a health and safety committee, and it usually exists within unionized workplaces. And workers can also demand that their employer meet with them over health and safety conditions. So again, there's several diverse forms to think about health and safety committees. So now we'd like to ask folks a quick question in the audience here. And I'd like to get a sense of where we're at and what are people's experiences in this in this session with committees. So I'm going to ask Jesse to help me out. So what we're going to ask everyone is, you'll see a screen pop up in front of your Zoom screen that poses a question, a poll essentially. And you could just click on the best answer that applies to you. So Jesse, whenever you're ready, if you could launch poll 1.
Yeah, so I cannot access the poll right now. I'm not sure if Marianela can access the poll.
I think we're gonna have to walk Jessica through this, or Caitlin, or someone.
I can do it. Yeah, I can do it.
Awesome, thank you.
Sorry, I actually can't. I'm inactive, it says, from another device.
I can do it, Marianela, if you just tell me.
Yeah, so you go to the bottom of your screen in the black bar menu, and you should see a polls little graph. You go there.
It looks like it's up already.
Yeah, there it is. Oh, right, great.
Folks are already actively seeing it. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So the question to the poll is, do you have experience with health and safety committees, which is what we want to learn from this group today. And we have over 100 people participating on this call. So I'd love to hear from what your experience is. And the first response is, yes, I'm in a committee and it's super effective. We do health and safety changes at our work site. The next one is, yes, I'm part of one, but it needs a little help. It may not be the most effective committee. The third option is, yes, I am part of a committee, but management dominates, the committee or takes control of it. And lastly, I'm not part of a committee, but I'd like to, create one. So it looks like we have several responses, and the lead is that many of you at the moment may not have a committee, but are interested in creating one, which is wonderful. And I hope this is a starting point for folks. The second place, we do have a committee, but it needs help, and that's okay too, because we all need help. We all have space for improvement, and we're hoping that the resources you'll take today will help with that. And third, we have, yes, I do, but management takes control of it, which is also something that happens. And then lastly, yes, and then we have a couple of folks who are already part of great committees, which is great because we want to hear your experience during the small group breakout and what that looks like and what makes it so effective. So thank you for that. I'm going to end the poll now. So thank you everyone for participating. Okay. So I'm going to ask folks here, and this is where I'm going to ask for volunteers and folks to speak up if you'd like to unmute yourself. But I do have a question for the audience, which is, if you could share an example of a challenging experience with a health and safety committee. And I see the hand up of one compañero, Alex, who is an organizer for SEIU. Congrats, Alex, on your new role at SEIU. If you'd like to unmute yourself, I'd love to hear what that experience has been in terms of challenges with the Health and Safety Committee.
One of the, well, thanks, thank you for the introduction. One of the challenges that I faced in different spaces has been to get buy-in from workers. One of the reasons is a lot of employers will set up joint labor management safety committees per a contract, or even safety committees when there's not a union, and they're only involved in safety just in name. So they're just pretty much empty spaces. So many workers have been in part of safety committees where they've had the opportunity to give their feedback, but the employer doesn't recognize their feedback and just kind of does their own thing. So many workers, if they've been in different spaces like that, once they're approached about a safety committee or a health and safety committee, they tend to say, it doesn't work. I've been in one before. What's going to be the difference between a safety committee that we used to have to the one that's now? So it's always important that when a safety committee is being put together, that the employer, even if it's joint labor management, but that the employer knows and is going to take all the suggestions from workers into consideration, and is also that the employer is ready to be proactive to make changes. Because again, the best safety committee is the one where the workers have that they own and they have buy-in, but also that they see that their suggestions are respected. And unfortunately, again, I've been in a lot of spaces where the challenges are that it's just safety committee in name, but the workers are just there, just warming seats because the employer really doesn't care. They're just putting together a safety committee to check a box.
That's right. Thanks so much, Alex, for sharing that. I appreciate it. And yes, that is a common problem that you see, especially among the second type of committees that I mentioned, which is worker management, where you do have maybe a contract or a law that mandates, and it's sometimes like you said, a compliance check mark to ensure that happens. But we'll talk about how we can change that dynamic later today, because that's the goal of today's session. That how do we make committees that build worker power, but not just, create that space. And we have a second comment. I know your hand has been raised for some time. Christopher Hibben, if you'd like to unmute yourself and share what your challenge has been.
Yeah, so my challenge that I face quite often, both as a worker that worked at a meat company or meat packaging company, as well as a union steward, and then when I came on staff as a union rep, is that myself and workers, we bring up safety concerns that are addressing, the needs of the employees, but then the company comes back and says, well, it's not in our budget, so we can't approve it because it's not a financial option right now. So it's like, okay, well, now you're putting a price tag on the safety, but these workers are, being jeopardized right now based on these safety concerns. So that's the one thing that I notice a lot, is that when they put something on hold, and then we ask for a timeline, then they kind of drag their feet. And then, I think that And they said, well, you know, it's not in our budget. We have to wait. It's a capital improvement. So now some of these safety concerns are going on, you know, 10 to 12 months of waiting to get fixed and addressed.
Got it. Thanks so much, Chris, for sharing that. That's also very important. You know, the how do we make the case for safety when it also comes to issues of budget for management? So thank you for sharing that. I know there's other folks that want to share. I'd invite you to put it on the chat. We are taking note of these challenges because we'd like to address them. I'm going to move on to question number 2, which is also related. But aside from the challenges, we'd love to hear what have been maybe some positive experiences with health and safety committee. So I'm going to ask for another volunteer that share their comment. But if you don't want to unmute yourself, I welcome you to please share that positive or challenging experience through the chat. Any volunteers to share a positive experience is the question at the moment. Hey, Richard, I see your hand is up. If you'd like to share a positive experience.
Sure. Working in the grocery store, we for Hagen, we have a safety committee and we have a corporate person that's in charge of the safety committee. And we vote our safety committee every year. And in our last contract, we got a master safety committee where the union meets with each employer every quarter to go over issues. So if we have a safety issue, like we need mats, we have a form we fill out. One goes to the union and one goes to our safety meeting. So if it doesn't get addressed at the store level, then we bring it up to the master safety committee where we meet with the company, the corporation, and our union president and whoever goes, and it works out. Like we needed mats, we got mats, you know, just little safety issues. So that's one
Great.
good positive way that our company does it, but not all companies do it.
Understood. Thank you so much for sharing that, Richard. Appreciate your participation. I also, I don't see any other hands up, but I do see some comments on the chat, which is, you know, the other positive experience is when you have worker engagement, you can use tools around mapping, identifying hazards, and it really is a way to engage workers. And that is also one other way to get the buy-in of workers, but also a visual way to show management, you know, what are some of the immediate hazards at the workplace. So if we could go on to the next slide. So again, the theme of this session is how health and safety committees build worker power, and at its core, organizing is about winning change through collective action around an issue that workers care about. So this collective action of building a committee is definitely a pathway to building worker power, and health and safety committees build worker power through different ways, which, you know, one is clearly define and prioritize worker demands for safe workplaces. It also allows for creating leadership roles for workers to build collective strength. It also is a way to communicate to management that workers demand safe, healthy work environments. And you can also plan and execute actions to improve, you know, workplace safety and demonstrate the power of collective action to win even broader change. So it's important to note that that workplace health and safety is such an important issue to organize workers around for many reasons. You know, workers are the experts at their job and often know the dangers and improvements needed in their workplace a lot better than management. And they are in the best position to hold their employers accountable on their legal responsibility to provide safe workplace. And again, as I mentioned, it's, you know, at its core, organizing is about winning change through collective action around an issue that workers care about. With health and safety issues, a lot is at stake, even sometimes a worker's life. By organizing around health and safety issues, committees can both tap into deep motivations for change among their coworkers and overcome some of the fear that comes with confronting the employer. And then safety is also a legal, moral, and civil right for all workers. And lastly, you know, the public and community support worker safety for the most part. When an employer is exposed for dangerous working conditions, Usually everyone, both workers and the public, see the real value that employer places on the lives of its workers. So that's also very important in the process of building worker power. And again, I'm going to ask folks if they can unmute yourself, and I'm going to ask for your feedback in what we're doing next, which is when you're thinking, for those who have had experience with committees in particular, what are strategies or what makes qualities that make a committee effective? And in this case, you can use the video as an example of, again, or what makes the committee ineffective. Anyone like to share any thoughts or reactions? It could be to the video or to your own experience around effective and ineffective qualities of a committee.
Participation by employees in the safety committees is critical. If people aren't engaged and actively participating, then your meeting can quickly go downhill.
That's right. Thank you so much, Steve, for that feedback. That's important, engagement and participation, which also can speak to the need for workers to be part of the process to build the agenda, right, of the meeting itself, ensuring that it reflects the needs and issues of the workers. Silvia, you have your hand up. How are you, Silvia? We have Silvia from Southern California, Kosh, joining us.
Gracias.
Hi, yes. I think it's important that the workers know the risks in their workplace. That helps a lot in order to enforce the campaign here. And we have one for a company that is called Green, and the air is contaminated, and where the workers are working, they have been able to show that the air is affecting their health, and the campaign has been strengthened a lot. And they've already put a complaint, and they are actively participating with the support of the community and the municipality, because it is also affecting the community. Excellent. Thanks for sharing, Sylvia.
Either effective or ineffective qualities of a committee. I do see some comments in the chat. Thanks, Kenneth. I see for good committees, it's important to delegate, support new people with new ideas, to call on people. The worst thing is they might say they will pass, but more often than not, calling on somebody gets them to contribute. That's also important. And language access. I see here from El Centro de Migrantes, thank you, Julia. The importance, if you have spaces with multilingual workers and so forth, that you make the meetings also language accessible. Ezequiel, usted tiene su mano levantada, ¿gusta comentar?
And so there's someone with your hand up. Would you like to comment? Hi, yes, good afternoon. My name is Ezequiel Alonso. I'm with the Mixtec Indigenous Organization. The people put us to work and they don't clean things, and there's always something, and that's what they do. And even in the job, the machines are very close to where we are, and you can slip, and that's something that's also a risk. And so that's during the strawberry season, sometimes the machines break, and then there's thank you, Ezequiel. I think the problem that's there is when they don't respond to the needs or to the solutions and the team for safety and security. So thank you for sharing that.
Wonderful. So, and I see more comments on the chat. I see from Nancy. Hi, Nancy. It says management should not run or chair the meeting. Workers and union members on the committee meet before the meeting with management. And yes, thank you, Nancy, for saying that. We did say it's important that even though you have worker management committees, if workers could meet on the side to ensure that their agenda, their priorities are shared in a very strategic way, and decide on their key issues and make sure that those issues are front and center in the meeting. So thank you so much for all the comments. We're going to do our very best to include them in the notes here, and share. And then the last is a problem, which is also very good to note, is when you have committee members that are all handpicked by management, that's also an issue in some cases, because it might not be the best representation of worker issues. So thank you so much to everyone for contributing to this. Again, feel free to add to the chat. What I will do now is present our upcoming speakers that will share a little bit about their experience and models around committees itself. So the first person I'm going to present, we have Basilio Castro, who's an organizer for the Western North Carolina Workers Center, and it has a community-based health and safety committee. I want to point out that Western North Carolina Workers Center is a proud member of our COSH network, and we have Basilio on the line. Basilio, ¿está ahí?
Basilio, are you there? If you could, yes. That's good. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Basilio Castro. I'm from the Western North Carolina Worker Center. I'm very pleased to be with you all this afternoon. I recognize many familiar faces and new faces as well, and that really encourages me to keep working with COSH National and Safety and Security. They have supported us a lot here in North Carolina, that even before we have received training at the end of the year in Maryland. And there's things that we do miss a lot, to be together and to have activities together, to learn from each other. During the pandemic, we haven't had that privilege, but let's not lose faith that we're going to be able to get together again in person. And that way we could be able to learn a little more of what we can learn about working together with respect to health and safety committees in the workplace. I would like to briefly present what the North Carolina Center, what we've done with the most vulnerable workers there in North Carolina. It's a mountainous area where, unfortunately, a lot of information doesn't reach there to the workers about how they can stand up for their rights, how to create a health and safety committees in their workplaces. I'm going to repeat thank you to each of you. We have learned so much from you. And like the mission of our center is to build among our workers of colors through organizing, education, and direct action from a intersectional standpoint to promote worker justice for all workers. And as we've already said, we also want to create leadership amongst the workers, like we see here on the screen. We have a colleague here. She is Chapina. She's from Guatemala. Her name is Miranda. She's part of the committee of workers on a chicken processing plant. She's also been in some of the trainings that we've had in person on safety and security. And she's also been one who's received support from all of y'all who's had actions in the work area. She's had that experience and she has practiced it in the workplace, like we see. Developing these themes in the workplace, like we see here at the center, that the center works with workers to build individual and collective work power for Latin immigrant workers grounded in worker leadership circles that is made up of the worker-led committees. And those 3 committees are led by those same workers, beginning with the investigation committee, which is a group of, they are leaders that investigate what are the problems that exist in the workplace. And then there is the educator committee. They also educate their colleagues about health and safety, about what way can we approach the most important issues that we see in the workplace in regards to safety and security. And then there is the other committee, the organizer committee, that also organizes any actions that can be taken in the committee. The organizing committee invites their colleagues to be part of the group so they can also take leadership of the situations that they should take in workplace areas. Here we also have some workers at the chicken plant who are working on the investigators committee, and it's very interesting because we have tried to involve all of the member leaders of the committee from different sectors of the same plant, because there is the people from the live chickens, there's the sector of there's the section of the chickens that have already been cleaned. There are many problems that come up. And so as you see in the image, they are investigating what are the problems. They're making a risk map in the workplace. And so it was very interesting because we see that the center of workers went to had a sports like event, and they invited people to come, their friends and family members to the field to develop this. And here we have the educators committee. The educators committee, as we have said before, they give training and they are responsible for carrying out the workshops for facilitation and health and safety. And they have the experience and they receive the training on part of the worker center. And this year, we did it for 5 weekends, and we did it digitally. And thanks to the worker center, they provided the internet, they provided the equipment so that all those workers could be at home and get their 5 hours of training and be ready to develop the trainings for their colleagues. These are worker leaders. They are workers from the same plant. Some are workers from other plants, but it's the same problems that exist in the plants. And that's the moment that they are working for a safety plan. And also there is the center workers also does the popular education in the communities.
De la comunidad son gente guatemalteca, compatriota mía.
There's a great population from Guatemala. Unfortunately, most did not have a higher education, but they have that leadership within them. That is something we focus on. Leadership comes within us. So then we are able to educate other colleagues at work. Popular education is very important. As we see, it's about increasing the critical conscious of the workers, but also the consumers. And also increasing the leadership of workers. As you see, the short woman in the front, she always says, the height of a human is not you begin measuring someone's height above their head, from their head up. She says this because she's short. And so the majority of these committees are led by women. I am so proud by this group of women. And as we see here, it's also the motivation to lead campaigns. So then the own leaders, the own workers can lead the campaigns in favor of the workers. And we also talked about the committee, the organizers committee that focuses on motivating friends, coworkers to be part of the investigations and the studies.
Cabo durante el transcurso del año, ya que hay mucho que hablar sobre salud y seguridad, porque es parte
There's so
importante
throughout the year.
en las áreas de trabajo.
This is such a key. Safety and health is so important throughout the years. So as we see here, there are women leaders in the image. They are tired of the lack in safety in the workplace. And that's what they focus on to motivate their colleagues.
Como vemos acá, los
Here,
trabajadores, como decían, pues han liderado
as I mentioned, workers themselves have led the campaigns for a well-being of other workers.
que ellos, sobre todo, luchan por sus derechos en el trabajo. También,
And we also see that gender is very important in the workplace and that it should be inclusive. This is what we see on the on the screen. And to close, we see that the Center of Workers develop leaders according to the workers' own interest, and the workers that join a committee is based on their interest and skills. Usually when we run a training, we see how worker leaders that are part of the committee select what committee they want to be in. And so many of them choose the study, the investigative team, the facilitator committee, and other committees. So as we see here, once these committees of workers are formed, and they create the responsibilities and plans of actions to lead that area of work. Throughout the year, what we do is workers are able to invite other colleagues to build strength in that group and bring and create more power in the area of work. And this is what we are doing in the Western Worker Center, the Western North Carolina Worker Center. And thank you for your time. Thank you, Basilio. Excellent work. So much inspiration. We congratulate you on the development that you are doing over there in the community, the workers. And I know that many of them also participate in leading the work and presenting the work that you are all doing. Thank you once again.
Presenter, just for purposes of time, making sure we can run to the end of the program. We have invited Steve Salmon, who serves as the Director of Health and Safety and Environment at the United Steelworkers, who's going to talk a little bit about health and safety committees under a union contract. Welcome, Steve, and thank you for joining us.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you, Jessica, for the honor and privilege, and to Kosh for pulling all of this together, and for all of you who've taken the time from your busy schedules to be here on for such an important subject. I look forward to learning more of the items that's been shared today, and I will build upon what Jessica and everyone else has already said. It's been great. And before I get into my slideshow, I'll just touch on a few things here. What is the most important that we have learned as the United Steelworkers is over decades. The steelworkers over 70 decades have learned a lot about committees, whether that be bargaining committees, safety committees, civil rights committee. It's very fundamental, and it's important to make sure that we get these things right. And I'll say the very first thing that is the most important is a worker or union only health and safety committee. Without that, you really can't have anything else. So I want to emphasize how important a union only or worker only committee is to setting everything up for success. And first, that committee is to handle complaints, but more importantly is to come up with solutions. Workers are experts. They know what needs to be done, and they know how to fix things or what could make it better and make suggestions. So if you're having problems with an elevator, people come up with ideas and they talk about the solutions needed, such as a PM program, periodic maintenance. And then what are the key things that's needed from the committee for workers to be safe and have safer workplaces? And those solutions then starting small, working up to something big, but to get some quick wins. And then what are the escalating tactics that this union-only committee can talk about to get employers to do what they don't want to do when it comes to the workers' needs for having a safer workplace? And they may come up with some type of a campaign. It was great to see the pictures in the previous presentation about, the picketing, gathering in strength and numbers. There might be a sticker campaign. There might be people wearing buttons or t-shirts. But in that union only committee, they could have the elevator company come in who has union people who work for that elevator company. And why not have the union elevator representative from the union come in and say, what should be happening with the elevator in your workplace? And I'm using this as an example because that's what happened in one of our workplaces. And so those are those things that we can do as a union or worker only committee to start building leverage. And then on the second part, I want to make mention of this. We call it a labor management safety and health committee. At times I've seen there in the chat and some of the conversation today, it's been called a joint committee. We don't call it a joint committee anymore. And let me give you one example why. When we go to the bargaining table, we are union and they are management. We don't call it a joint bargaining committee. We call it the union and the management having their own bargaining committee. So when it comes to safety, let's not lose our identity. Let's keep our identity and let's call it a labor management health and safety committee, a union management health and safety committee. So let's make sure we get that right so that we never lose our identity. And in those labor management safety and health committees, we'll go to this first slide, and there's some structure that exists. And you will see when you look at this, there is the top row of a labor management health and safety committee, and then the bottom row, which is a subcommittee there in the center, that may be something of a departmental committee. It might be something that deals specifically with like ergonomics. But either way, depending upon how your workplace, it might be big, it might be small. You might need the top row to have a labor management health and safety committee to deal with things facility-wide. You might need something at the lower level of a subcommittee to deal with departmental issues. But the most important part about this structure, whether it's the top row or the bottom row, is the left-hand side. And that is the union or the worker health and safety committee. That's where everything starts. And that's why I started my presentation there, to make sure that everyone understands the importance of it. There are two separate committees. Management has theirs and the union has theirs. And that's where you meet in the middle to address and solve problems. And we should never lose our identity. And that's why we call it a labor management safety and health committee. And in that structure, the union selects its own people. That could be through a vote, that could be people volunteering to the union, not to management. They come forward and the union selects its representatives. That would be people who represent the major departments, the shifts, and making sure that you're including places like a warehouse, a maintenance department, that we don't lose any of those people in the identity. So does it represent the major departments and shifts? And then the meetings, so when those committees meet, how often do they meet? And sometimes we've heard that they meet for 1 hour once a month. And I would say for any workplace, there's more the health and safety issues than we have time to deal with. But if you only meet 1 hour once a month, that means you get 12 hours a year to deal with health and safety issues. So that's not enough. So think about what's happening in your workplace and the time that's needed. And the agendas. So when these committees meet, have the meetings with the union only group, develop the items that should be on the agenda, and then have a co-chair that on the union side would meet with the co-chair on the management side of this structure and say, here's the things that we need to talk about. They develop the agenda, they send that out ahead of time to people so that they can review it and people come prepared, ready for an effective meeting. And then the duties and functions, if we can move to the next slide, and it'll be my final slide, is the key activities that makes a health and safety committee effective. And these are just some examples. And so what kind of research needs to be done in the workplace? How well is the training working? Do they seem like they're understanding the training? Research, we've had a lot of people with leaving the workplace. Do we have green working with green? Is there new training new or new working with new? Do the research, how are things working? Review the current health and safety hazards or hazardous conditions in the workplace. Looking at all things from the way work is organized, there's a lot of people doing more with less with understaffing and hours of work. And then investigating accidents, incidents, near misses, and other adverse events such as spills or there's been an outbreak with COVID and how are people doing these jobs with fewer people? And then conduct worker and union involved in-depth inspections. Go around, talk to people, see what they're doing, how they do their work. This isn't about behaviors. This is about the hazards that people are exposed to. And the workers are the solution, not the problem. And talk to people, they will tell you. And this is where you engage and involve members to be part of that solution. And then keep records, document, and document. Track your progress, look at action plans, evaluate your success, and most importantly, celebrate your wins. So when you got the elevator fixed and you had ideas from people that was there to help the union or the workers, celebrate that success. At first, it might have just been greasing the door, but we talked about the injuries when people were pulling the door down and ultimately how that made leverage to get the elevator replaced. And take credit for that. Don't let the employer take credit for what the union or the workers were able to accomplish. And then out of these records, there's more to this that comes. There's pitfalls that can exist. You've seen where management dominates the committees. Do things go into a deep, dark hole where things never go to get fixed and management keeps putting it off? Develop action plans to start escalating things to raise consequences for management if they don't fix things. If they fix it with just us asking them, great. If they don't, find a bigger tool to get management to do what they don't want to do. And then I'll close out with this by saying the goal is a safer workplace. But ultimately, there's a second goal, an equal goal, and that is to build worker power, build the union around health and safety, and get members involved. And that too is part of the goal of not just having a safe workplace, but a strong union. And in that, you will see some ways, there'll be a handout that goes with this presentation that will be shared at some point by Kosh. There's 32 questions, which is a Labor Management Safety and Health Committee self-evaluation tool on effective committees. And it deals with structure, meetings, agendas, duties, and functions of the committee. And pay close attention to question number 1, which is how are the representatives selected? And question number 7, which is having some union only time to prepare for the labor management that's paid by management. So that will be in the handout that you will see as the conclusion of this. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, Jessica mentioned Nancy Lesson earlier. And Nancy Lesson has retired from our department, but she's a great resource to Kosh groups and workers. And she's the one who's put a lot of that handout together. So I want to make sure that she's properly recognized in the handout that's been distributed by us. So thank you.
Wonderful, Steve. Thank you so much. And you couldn't summarize any better, really, a lot of the goals of this session, along with Basilio, which is, again, the process of building worker power, engaging workers in a strong union, whether it is a union or non-union work site, but the idea of collective action among a group of workers. So thank you to both the speakers and for sharing your examples. Again, this webinar is intended to give you a glimpse of the work that we do at the Kosh Network, but we have several resources to continue to support your work. So I'm now going to introduce my colleague, Marianela Cunha-Diasta, who's the Southern Regional Coordinator, and she's going to lead us through the next session, which will be an opportunity for us to talk about our own experiences. Marianela?
Hello. Hi. ¿Cómo están? ¿Sí me escuchan ya?
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me? All right, so I'm going to introduce the activity that we have right now. We learned a lot from Basilio, we learned a lot from Steve, and we learned a lot from Jessica, and even from the office, we learned a lot. So now I want everyone to have the opportunity to learn from each other. So I'm going to share again my screen. And I'm going to ask Caitlin and Susie that they share in the chat the link so that people can take notes for this next activity. And I'm going to share my screen. We're going to put this link in the chat, and you all are going to click so that it will open up. And then in the next slide, I'm going to explain the slide that's coming up. But right now, I want you all to simply click on that link and open it up. And if you're on your telephone or for any reason you can't get the link, don't worry. You can put the notes in the chat or even on a piece of paper. So no worries. So this is what the document is going to look like that you all have opened. And here are also the instructions, and I'm going to give them to you, but here they are again. But these are the instructions of the next activity we're going to do. Okay, so let's moving forward, and because my computer's giving me a little bit of problems. All right, so this activity, the goal is for us to learn from each other, and about the safety and security committees. You're going to talk about an experience that you have had, what you have learned from that, or some experience that you want to have, like how would you like to imagine how leadership and power and how to create the committee for safety and security for workers. So what I want you to do is to introduce yourselves to each other so you get to know each other. And for these health and safety committees, tell me what you have learned from that experience. And if you haven't had an experience with a health and safety committee, then what is it that you would want to do? How would you like to see the leadership and see the membership grow through the health and safety committee? The next thing is that I ask is that everybody has a chance to share. So please make sure you share the mic. And the time that we have for this activity, I think we have 15 minutes. Is that fine? Is that 15 minutes fine in terms of time? Yes. Okay, so yes, 15 minutes in the small groups. And then afterwards, we'll come back together. And I'll be checking on how much time is left so that you all can take the floor. Are you ready? Okay. For the people who haven't yet selected their language, so
did you had enough time? Were you able to share? Yes, we shared. It was excellent. Very good. I see a lot of notes on the document, and I want to share one or two comments that are on the notes, but I also wanted to give an opportunity to two groups of what did you learn? What did you discuss? You can simply raise your hand.
Los grupos pequeños hicieron que fueran más tímidos. Eso es raro. Al revés normalmente pasa. Y sí, aquí Jessy me está diciendo que habían 21 grupos. ¿Nadie quiere compartir?
Sí, buenas.
Jesse tells me no one wants to share. Basilio, tell me. I was here with my colleague Julieta and colleague Ezequiel, Hilaria. I learned a lot. What did you talk about? About the Health and Safety Committee. Ezequiel shared that he's in the state of California, Ventura County. And it seems like he works more with field workers. He was sharing that their focus was mostly on housing. The housing isn't that good for workers, so they began a health and safety committee with a focus on housing. Julieta shared the same, and then that they do not have a worker center, but they do have a committee that is ready to start functioning as a committee. Oh, so good. Thank you. Thank you, Basilio, for sharing. One other group that can share. How did it go? I believe Dan raised their hand. Go ahead, Dan.
I was in a group with Heather and Ryan, who are both UFCW union reps, and actually had sort of quite a bit of experience with health and safety committees. And so they spoke a little bit about kind of similar to the previous presentation, that kind of, well, their experience was, at least from Ryan's, was as the committees are codified in the union contract. And at the time, the language was codified in the union contract, that there was quite a bit of interest from members in joining those committees. But as those committees, as management did not seem too responsive to those committees, even in those joint meetings, or particularly in those joint meetings, that membership kind of dwindled. And we actually talked about how, without these worker only kind of health and safety committees, that sometimes those joint committees can be somewhat detrimental because they discourage folks from speaking up and participating, especially in circumstances when the management is not responsive. And so everyone, and additionally kind of talked about the importance of sort of developing strong leaders and, having the stewards participate on the health and safety committees. It seemed like management was most responsive to union reps. And so they both sort of said it's really great opportunity to have this separate worker meeting where they can listen to the workers' concerns. And then if need be, they can sort of represent those concerns if management is not responsive. So we talked about a lot actually, but I'll let someone else go.
Thank you so much. So I hear you saying thank you to all your team, and also like for you for reporting. So I'm hearing you say, I think a big moral that we want people to take away with today, which is even if you have a worker management committee, it's really necessary for you to also have like a worker only committee, because it can be, as you said, like it can be even detrimental to have a space where people are given the experience that they're voiceless and that they're not actually listened to. So really having that space where they are listened to and where workers are like leading the way, choosing priorities, identifying risk, identifying solutions is like really the experience that we want, workers to have, and for them to build power in that way. So I had David wanting to say another comment. I asked him to please add it in the chat because I have to wrap us up so we can let you go on time. But I did want to show you again my screen really briefly, because I want you to see that here in the document that you already have access to, there is a summary of all the lessons and all the stories that the different teams talked about. So you can access that after. And at the end of this page, you'll also have access to the resources that we'll make available to you on an email that we follow up with, but they're also here in case you need them like right this second. And I want to share my screen to show you this resource that we just put together to sort of like launch after this or during this webinar today, which is going to be a guide with a lot of the things that we're talking about today, like the key principles of worker-led safety and health committee, steps, things to prevent in terms of management, taking over the agenda. And we're going to share this with you in the follow-up email. And we're also going to be sharing it over social media. And we invite you to both read through it, use it as a guide, but then also we would love for you to share it with your membership, with your coworkers, with other organizers that are doing similar work and are interested in building safety and health committees. So we'll send this to you along with the recording to today and the slides to today's webinar. And I want to wrap up by asking for your feedback. So there's two ways that we're going to ask for feedback today. One of them is one question poll that Susie is going to help us launch. And it's just asks you how do you like it? Was it useful? And sort of to rate the training. But the other thing that I want you to do is that you can share in the chat, or you can share in the Google Doc that we were just using. If you still have it open, if you scroll down all the way, you will see these two questions. One of them is, what was most useful to you during this session? And you can start writing here. And then the other one is what can we improve for the next time that either we have a webinar or that we have a webinar talking about committees. And this will help us so we bring more relevant programs next time to you or to the folks that are with us next time. So I'll give you a couple minutes to share. Let me ask you something. Is the poll up? Can you see the poll right now? Because as a co-host, I can't. Okay, great. So thank you so much for filling that out. And then please use the chat or use this document that we shared to give us some feedback. So one, what was most useful or what was most useful to you from this session? And then what can we improve for next time? And I will let you do that while I give you a couple announcements. So we have April webinar is going to be dedicated to Workers' Memorial Week. And we are inviting you to participate in the release of our Dirty Dozen report, which is a report about very unsafe employers that are causing harm to workers across the country. And very importantly, the campaigns and the workers who are fighting back for better rights, for better protections. So this is a save the date for April 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So it's going to be 1 hour earlier than this one, just so you know. And we want to invite you also to do your own local event for Workers' Memorial Week, either to build power, build leadership, or to escalate your campaigns, or to honor workers in your area who have been killed by work. And we have two resources that we want to share with you, and we'll be sure to put this in the email, in the follow-up email too. They're both on our website, but it's a toolkit for actions, and there's also resources of all kinds, for, you know, sending a letter to the editor, doing like a press release, supporting a surviving family member of a worker who was killed on the job, and many, many other things. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention was follow us at National COSH if you don't yet, both on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And then lastly, we have a couple workshops coming up. They're here. We'll also send you these dates. But I already told you about the Dirty Dozen release event. And we also have the May webinar is going to be dedicated to heat stress, and how to fight against heat exposure and do campaigns for protections against heat stress. So with that, I think I may be 2 minutes over the time, because those announcements were too hot. But thank you so much for being here with us today. I want to bring back Jessica and Basilio and Steve to say bye to y'all. And thank you so much for our interpreters for interpreting, for you for being here and for your participation, and for the whole National COSH team that's behind the scenes making it happen. Thank you so much.